What's up, guys? It's Tealus here. Welcome back to Arcurus. It's been a while since we've been back here, but I'm here to give you another class overview looking at Unholy Death Knights this time around. Unholy actually is probably the one spec in which I have been most surprised about what changes have come to the spec. Honestly, when I did, regular quick overview of what was coming in World of Warcraft Legion, I didn't see too many changes coming to Unholy. I was like, okay, they're separating. I noticed that they were separating Frost and making it more Frost of it, it's kind of its own thing. But I kind of just assumed that Unholy would basically still be, you know, its disease-centric spec, like the melee, I guess, version of an Affliction Warlock a little bit, sort of, with keeping your diseases up and going and then having your pet. And then when I started going through the actual changes of Unholy Death Knight, I was really impressed and surprised and kind of excited with where things are going for an Unholy DK. Now, that is not to say that it's changed and that it's no longer it still is a pet oriented and disease oriented spec. Okay, so don't take my words to think that it's completely going off of that theme, I should say, for the spec. That theme for the spec is still there. However, its play style has been changed. And that's what I found most interesting about Unholy. So this is going to be a 2-video series, like all the other ones. We'll be looking in this video at the removed, changed, and new abilities for an Unholy Death Knight, which there's a lot to go through there. In addition, we'll be looking at the artifact weapon for an Unholy Death Knight, which is, you can see right here, this is the base form. It actually looks really cool. I really do like it. So, one of the cooler, I think, base forms for an artifact weapon. And that will be the first video. And then in the second video, we will be looking at the PvP and PvE talents for an Unholy Death Knight. Now, I do believe Unholy Death Knight is pretty stable, and ability-wise, stuff will not change for an Unholy Death Knight. However, do expect damage numbers to probably come down for Unholy Death Knight. They are doing a massive amount of damage, and I do believe they are probably the kings of AoE in World of Warcraft Legion. Once again, you never know just how much damage like Seed of Corruption spam will do, or something along those lines. Just last video I was talking about how powerful marksmanship will be as an AoE class. It depends a lot on damage numbers, but the sheer amount of abilities of marksmanship hunters to deal AoE damage makes me think that it will be one of the two kings of AoE in World of Warcraft Legion, the other being the Unholy Death Knight. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Removed abilities, changed abilities, and the new abilities. We're going to start with removed. First, Blood Boil has been removed. It's now blood only, so you do not have access to that. Blood Presence, Frost Presence, Unholy Presence, all the presences have been removed. This is a recurring theme for Blizzard throughout all of their specs. They really just wanted to get rid of it, not deal with that anymore. With the exception of arms, battle stance and defensive stance are gone for warriors. You have your different stances on monks are gone as well. Your different stances as a holy priest, your chakra stances are gone. They really have just gotten rid of stances altogether. And really the only class that is technically a stance changing class is your druids, which is the way it should be. Druids were all about shapeshifting, and then all of a sudden everyone got stances, and it just kind of watered things down. So nothing really gone. You don't really lose much with losing your presences, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Things will still kind of function still be in a good place for an Unholy Death Knight, and all Death Knights in general losing all the presences. Dark Simulacrum, if I pronounced that correctly, has been removed. It's a PvP talent, just like for Frost, so it's still there. Empower Rune Weapon. I know I said this in the Frost incorrectly in the Frost DK video, and I had to correct it, I believe, in the talents portion of the video. But Empower Rune Weapon is gone from Unholy. It is a Frost-only ability. So this time, I double-checked. Empower Rune Weapon is gone from this. I checked my talents beforehand. I'm going to be really mad if I oversight again and Empower Rune Weapon is actually there when I said it was gone again. So, Empower Rune Weapon is gone. Festering Strike, I'm saying it's gone, but it's gone in all but name. Its name still is retained. It functions differently because of how things have changed for the playstyle of an Unholy Death Knight, but Festering Strike is gone. Horn of Winter, it's a Frost talent now only, so you do not have access to that. Icy Touch, Outbreak, and Plague Strike. Icy Touch, Outbreak, and Plague Strike. All three of these are gone. Okay, this is where the playstyle change comes in for Unholy Death Knights. You know, they had basically your Icy Touch applied your Frost Fever, your Plague Strike applied your Blood Plague, and your Outbreak, applied both. You know, it was a little bit different. So Outbreak is gone in, like Festering Strike is out in all but name. So it's still going to be coming back as a new ability. I'm going to talk about it as a new ability, but it's just its old ability is gone. And then both Icy Touch and Plague Strike are gone. So you're no longer applying Blood Plague and Frost Fever. Frost Fever is now specific to Frost, and Blood Plague is actually now specific to Blood Death Knights. So, you know, basically all of your diseases that you had before for an Unholy Death Knight, which was, you know, half of the spec, and the other half being pets, are now gone, and instead you have this change in how you do stuff. So there's new stuff to take its place, which we will go through when we get to the new abilities, but just know that's basically the beginning, and that's why I go remove, change, and new, so you can see what you've lost and then what you're going to gain. That's how things are changing with this new spec, is that you know, the old style of applying your diseases and keeping them up is gone, and you're going to have something to take its place. Strangulate has been removed. It is a blood PvP talent now, so it is not available to either Unholy or Frost. Unholy Aura has been removed. Basically anything that is a aura of sorts that was flat, you know, buffs has been removed from the game, so wouldn't really worry about that. Soul Reaper has been removed and is now a talent. That has been it's your most recent new actual ability that you get. I think you get it in World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria, so it's no longer the case anymore. Soul Reaper is now a talent that we will get to in the next video. And then lastly, Necrosis, same thing. I believe that was a flat damage, a flat improvement to multi-strike, if I remember correctly. I can't quite remember, but it was a flat buff to one of the secondary stats, which was not needed. There's no reason for it to be there, especially if it was multi-strike, because multi-strike has been removed. And so the flat damage buffs are gone, or the flat stat buffs are gone, which I like. You know, I hated the whole fact they're like, hint, hint, here's your secondary stat, and, you know, let the people decide what their secondary stats are. And so that's what they have done. So I'm perfectly happy with that change. With that being said, that's everything removed for a Death Knight, an Unholy Death Knight. Before I get into the changed abilities, there's one thing that I need to clear up. As with Frost Death Knights, Unholy Death Knights now only operate off of just runes. You no longer have Unholy runes. You no longer have Death runes. You know, you no longer have Frost runes. The whole, you know, different separate rune system has been removed. Now you just have 6 runes. That's all it is. Anything that costs multiple runes will now just cost that same amount in, you know, in whatever runes are. So if it costs, basically what I'm saying is, like, if you had an ability that costs 1 Unholy, 1 Frost, 1 Blood rune, it now just costs 3 runes, okay? If you have an ability that costs 1 Unholy, 1 Frost, it now just costs 2 runes. So this was a simplification. You know, some things are complex, and they're interesting because they're complex. And then some things are just tedious complex, and I think this is one of those things that was kind of tedious complex. That really just didn't need to be there, so it's now just all runes across the board. You know, just imagine from a developer's side, you're creating a new ability. Okay, what do we make this cost? 1 Frost rune? No, well, 1 Frost rune, 1 Unholy rune, or 2 Unholy runes. That's just confusing. It's a lot easier just to have 6 runes, and so that's what they've gone with. So, moving into changed abilities, Anti-Magic Shell. Its cooldown's been increased from 45 seconds to 1 minute, so you now have a 1-minute cooldown on your Anti-Magic Shell. Chains of Ice. It now reduces movement speed by 70% instead of 60%, so a 10% increase there on the ability on Chains of Ice. And I'm actually going to be using these abilities because they've really gone through and they've changed melee abilities in World of Warcraft Legion, okay? That is their new thing that they've really worked on, is changing abilities. So I'm going to use several of these as I go through so you can see animations just in case they've changed it all. You know, a little bit different. Anti-magic shell chains of ice, I believe, are pretty close to the way they were, so there's nothing you should really worry about there. Control undead. It no longer reduces the haste of the controlled target. This basically has been applied to any type of controlling effect for any class out there. They've gotten rid of that haste reduction that was given to whatever you controlled. So I kind of like that changed a little bit better. I mean, really, there really was no reason for that. Also, the cast time has been increased by approximately 0.25 seconds. I think on live client it was like 1.1 second or something for its cast time, and now the new cast time is something like 1.4, I believe, 1.46. So it's somewhere in that range of a 25 seconds increase on that. Dark Transformation, a lot of changes here. So first off, it now has a 1 minute cooldown. Before it didn't have a 1 minute cooldown because it required you to get those stacks of Shadow Infusion. That's no longer the case. You now don't have to worry about your stacks of Infusion. It no longer consumes stacks of Infusion. You no longer have to build up stacks of Infusion. You just straight up get it. Let me go ahead and just pull my ghoul out right here. And there it is right there. I have Blighthead out, and I can just go ahead and use Dark Transformation right off the bat. Like, I don't even have to, like, I'm out of combat, but I can just use it whenever. It's got a minute cooldown. It no longer costs a rune. That was an enhancement that was given in Warlords of Draenor that's now baseline, and it now lasts 20 seconds down from 30 seconds. So that's kind of to compensate for the fact that you no longer have to have, you know, that, you no longer have to have that uptime on it. Now, I do realize that the tooltip does say 26 seconds. That's from a buff in the artifact weapon that we will get to, but for now, just know that baseline, it now lasts only 20 seconds, down from 30 seconds, and that is basically to compensate for the fact that you no longer have to consume the stacks of Shadow Infusion to use it. Instead, it's just on a 1 minute cooldown damage buff. Death and Decay. Death and Decay has a little additive now, in which Scourge Strike now hits all targets within Death and Decay. So if I use Death and Decay right here, and then I use Scourge Strike, it will now hit all the targets in range. And you're starting to see just crazy how much AoE you can start to get out of this here. It's kind of absurd, in all opinion. Death Coil can no longer heal an undead ally. So that part of Death Coil has been taken out of the equation. You can no longer heal an ally with Death Coil. However, Death Coil does now restore 10 energy to your ghoul. So as your ghoul is attacking and he uses his abilities, etc., like Claw, you can use Death Coil. I no longer have the the runic power for it, but you can now use Death Coil to give him some energy back. I know it's hard to see because his little bar is way tiny compared to you know, the rest of the bars that you see on the screen here. However, that is a change, just kind of a compensation for the fact that you can no longer heal out of it. Death Gate, real important here. Its cast time has been reduced from 8 seconds to 4 seconds, so cut in half there. Death Grip can no longer function as a taunt, so it's just straight Death Grip now. Death Strike no longer heals for a flat amount, so there's a little bit change here. It no longer costs it now costs 40 runic power instead of runes. So before it used to cost runes, I think it was like 1 Unholy, 1 Frost. I can't quite remember what it was. Rune cost is out now. If they kept it like that, it would have just been 2 runes. That has been removed now. Now it's just 40 runic power instead of runes. So you're going to have to manage your runic power if you want some health back as a Death Strike. In addition to that, do know that the healing has been changed. I said it no longer heals for a flat amount. Now it heals for 20% of all damage taken in the past 5 seconds. Cannot exceed 7% of max health. And unfortunately, I would like to test it on the tank dummy, but I don't think that counts towards it. I mean, we can try, and hopefully I survive and I don't kill myself too much. Building up my runic power here. Gotta be careful how much damage I take. And then we'll say that was all the damage that I took there. And I use this right here. And yes, it does not work as well with when we're talking about using it with a tanking dummy. But do know that 20% of all damage taken in the past 5 seconds, it will heal you for that. However, it cannot exceed more than 7% of your health. So just pay attention to that. cannot exceed more than 7% of your max health. So if you've taken a lot of damage, you know, if you take like, I don't know, if a raid boss, like if you take 80% of your health in that damage, Death Strike is only going to heal 7% of your health. No matter how much damage you took out of it, it's only going to heal for 7% of your health. So, a little bit there just to make sure it doesn't get out of control in terms of the actual, doesn't get too far out of control in terms of how much you can heal back. Mind Freeze, this is a great change. Mind Freeze now has a 15-yard range. It was melee range on live clients. I could have sworn that it was longer, but like I said, I go between my live client and on beta client and compare the two, and on live client it was melee range. Now it is a 15-yard range, which is great for a melee to have a 15-yard range on that. 15-yard range on that, not rage. Raise Ally will no longer cost any runic power. This is a great quality of life change. So if you're, mostly this will be like in a raiding situation, you need to raise an ally. You no longer have to build up your runic power for that. It's just straight up, you get it right away. Scourge Strike now causes a festering wound to burst. That really confuses you. No doubt it will confuse you, and we will come back to Scourge Strike when we've gone through new abilities. But that is a change. Scourge Strike now causes festering wound to burst. Summon Gargoyle now lasts 40 seconds up from 30 seconds. That was actually an enhancement in World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor. It's now permanent, so it's now baked in directly. And then lastly, On a Pale Horse no longer reduces the duration of movement impairing effects. That section has been taken out of it. Now you just get the straight mounted speed buff from On a Pale Horse. That's all you get out of it. It was hard to stop his death itself, increasing your mounted speed by 20%. So, with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the new abilities for an Unholy Death Knight. And this is where everything will start to kind of come together. And you'll see just how much has changed. I mean, these are huge changes to abilities in my opinion. So, first, one that's not so big is Dark Command. For some reason, Blizzard felt that anyone that has a tank spec, that all their DPS specs should have whatever their taunt is. So Holy Paladins have like Hand of Reckoning, if they didn't before, I can't remember off the top of my head. Without notes in front of me, now Dark Command is available to both Unholy and Frost, and it just, any spec with a taunt, Mistweavers, you name it, that has another spec that is a tank, now has that taunt baseline. I'm not really sure for the reasoning behind it, but really, it's really not, it's too insignificant to really worry about that. Festering Strike. So this is the first new ability that has really changed this time around. Still costs 2 runes, deals 113,000 physical damage, and infects the target with 2 to 4 festering wounds. Okay? Festering wound is a pestilent lesion. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna pronounce that wrong, and people will tell me, I'm sure, in comments how to actually pronounce that. A pestilent lesion that will burst on death or when damaged by Scourge Strike, dealing 16,000 shadow damage and generating 3 runic power. So Scourge Strike, as I mentioned before, now causes Festering Wound to burst, okay? That is exactly what it is talking about. So if I come up here and I use Festering Strike, I can use Scourge Strike after that, and it will cause it to explode there, which is pretty cool. Okay? You can see Festering Wound on the target, suffering from a wound that will deal 18,000 shadow damage when damaged by Scourge Strike. So, let's use Scourge Strike here. Okay? Constantly applying itself. It's great. Okay? Now, do notice that the stacks are somewhat going down. That is by design. Okay? So now it's all gone. So Festering Wound puts the stacks on there. And I believe there are other ways to put Festering Wound on the target. Through auto attacks. I believe it's through talent trees and whatnot. We'll take a look at it. But this is the main one. Is Festering Strike will be the main one that puts on 2 to 4 stacks of Festering Wounds. And then from there, you will be able to explode them through your Scourge Strike. So there's a little bit of a difference here. Okay? Next ability to look at is Outbreak. One rune, 30-yard range, deals 12,000 shadow damage, and surrounds the target in miasma, lasting for 6 seconds that causes the target and all nearby enemies to be infected with Virulent Plague. So this is a brand new one. Virulent Plague, a disease that deals 109,000 shadow damage over 10 seconds. It erupts when the infected target dies, dealing 37,000 shadow damage divided among nearby enemies, and has a 30% chance to erupt each time it deals damage. This is really strong. This is where the AoE starts to really pile on for a Death Knight. So we'll go ahead and use this here, and let's see the plague right there, infecting everyone there. It's infecting everyone. And I don't believe we've seen there's the explosion right there. So you saw the explosion right there. It has that 30% chance to erupt, and that was the eruption right there. Let's see if it actually does it. There it was one more time. That eruption right there. So it has that chance to erupt. So you have basically like two totally different kind of plagues, diseases, whatever you want to call them, to put on your target. You first use Outbreak, and then you use Festering Strike, and you have these abilities on here. And then you put Death and Decay underneath it, and then on top of that, with Death and Decay, Scourge Strike will hit all enemies near the target, which means that you're going to be able to burst any wounds that are on other targets by chance. So it's just, there's a lot of AoE splash damage all over the place as an Unholy DK, which is actually a lot of fun. And do remember that this is a rune, so I can put it here, and have it on this target. I can also put it over here on this target, and then all of a sudden we have plagues spreading everywhere. Make sure I don't actually put it on a Dungeoneer training dummy, because I will regret that. But as you can see, I'm now dealing damage in all four corners of this little ring here. And it's because it's so easy to apply this plague. 30-yard range, you just apply your plague from a distance and let it do the work if you want to for AoE damage, which is pretty powerful. And then on top of that, you can stack Festering Strike and your Death and Decay, and then just really start to lay on the damage. So there's a lot to add on there. Next ability to look at is Wraith Walk. This is a new one. This is basically Reaper from Overwatch. Wraith Walk, channeled 1 minute cooldown, sidestep into the Shadowlands, breaking root effects and increasing your movement speed by 70% for 3 seconds. During this time, all movement impairing effects will be suppressed, but any action will cancel the effects. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. And you can see here, I go Reaper form, and then I pop out. So it's pretty cool. This is just a nice ability that has been given to, I'm not quite sure yet if it's been given to Blood. I haven't done my Blood write-up, but it is given to both Frost and Unholy DK, so it's a great ability to have. Defensively, offensively, however you use it, it's pretty good. So, because remember, it does increase your movement speed for 70%, so if you want to close in on someone, you can, or if you want to get away, you can. 1 minute cooldown, pretty nice. There's Death's Advance. I believe this used to be an ability, and it was kind of taken away, and then it's brought back. Death's Advance increases movement speed by 15%. I believe it was a talent. That's where it was. It was a talent competing with some other difficult talents that were difficult to compete with. So just Unholy Death Knights now have a flat 15% increased movement speed buff, which I think is kind of broken, especially since they have so many abilities that can be launched from range. But I mean, then again, Frost DKs have Howling Blast, so it's kind of up in the air, which one, you would want more. But Death's Advance, 15% flat increased movement speed. The last one was an old talent. This is the last new ability. Runic Corruption, you have a 1.25% chance per runic power you spend to increase your rune regeneration rate by 100% for 3 seconds. So basically just ripping off the talent, putting it baseline, and there you go. That concludes all of the new abilities for an Unholy DK. There's a lot there. And honestly, when we get into the talent video, you'll see there's a lot of fun applications as well inside the talent video of what you can do as an Unholy DK. But in all honesty, I really like where it's going. I personally have no clue whatsoever what this what the rotation will be. I have no clue what the rotation will be. I mean, I'm assuming, you know, you get your both your plagues up. You use Scourge Strike a lot. You use Festering Strike to make sure that you have your stacks of Festering Wound up on the target. And then from there, I'm not quite sure what you do. You have to make sure Outbreak is up at all times, etc. And I'm not sure if Death and Decay will be in the rotation. For the most part, at least from my knowledge, PvEers don't like Death and Decay being in a rotation. It's awkward. I remember a time in which there was some complaints about that, or at least I remember it being about Death and Decay. It could have been about Explosive Trap as hunters, as hunters at one point, so I may be mistaking it for that time. But hopefully Death and Decay is not in the rotation, unless it's an AoE, which is, you know, what you would use Death and Decay for. So hopefully that has been changed and will be a little bit different now, but we will have to see about that. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the artifact weapon for a Unholy Death Knight. The artifact weapon for an Unholy Death Knight is called Apocalypse. It's just called Apocalypse, that's it. No special names or anything, it's just called Apocalypse. So, the ability you get off of Apocalypse, and I do believe that this may be one that you actually get multiple new abilities, if I'm correct. I could be wrong on this, though. But we have, sorry, there's only one, and it's called Apocalypse. Kind of wish they'd named it something else other than the weapon, but I'm not going to complain too much. So, Apocalypse strikes an enemy, dealing 37 physical damage and bursting all festering wounds on the target, summoning a member of your army of the dead for 15 seconds for each burst of the festering wound. This is pretty awesome. So let's just show this off here. I'm gonna put up as many stacks as I can of festering wounds. So we have 4 there, 8 there, and is 8 the max that you can get? It looks like 8 may be the max that you can get. Let's try one more time, see if we can get something better here. Yeah, 8 is max you can get on the target. Okay, and then I'm going to use Apocalypse here. And it's going to burst all of them, and then I have Army of the Dead. And on top of that, I can cast Army of the Dead on top of that, and then just look how many minions I have. Tell me this is not the one of the greatest pet classes, because Beastmaster is pretty awesome as well. But this is pretty cool. Having all of these ghouls here able to deal damage is actually really cool. And that comes from Apocalypse. Really cool ability that you have now. And a lot of AoE damage at the same time. It's just kind of absurd how much AoE damage and how much summoning of the dead you can do as Unholy. It's really a lot of fun, and I do like where they haven't gone away from the theme of the class. They've, I guess you could say, delved even deeper into the theme of the class, which is really cool. It's surprising because, like, at first you're like, oh my gosh, we've lost Blood Plague and Frost Fever, what are we going to do? But then you realize that they've made up for it with 2 brand new plagues that are way better, and they're not just like flat damage buffs. And instead they've brought in something that is a whole lot more potent than what is on live, and then you have the ability to summon so many ghouls and have more options for your ghouls and your summons as well, which is really cool as an Unholy Death Knight. So they have really dived into the theme of Unholy. Even though it seems like there's some changes at first, they really have zeroed in on it. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and look through the talents of Apocalypse. I'm going to start in the I'm going to start in the very bottom left corner. So we're going to start in the southwest corner, and we'll go to the northeast. So starting with this epic one, we have Death Coil has a chance to increase your Scourge Strike damage against the target by 50% for 6 seconds. I honestly don't know how often this occurs. I will try a few hits here to see if I can build up and see if I can get a proc on this. But something tells me I'm not gonna. My wish will not be granted here for this, unfortunately. So we will try. Let me try just until the end of this here. It looks like that's it. So just know that that is an option there. You have a 50% chance to increase the damage of your Scourge Strike off of that. Off of your Death Coil. 6 seconds, okay? So increase your Scourge Strike damage against your target by 50% for 6 seconds. So you have 6 seconds to use that. Next here we have Darkest Crusade. Increases the effect of your Fallen Crusader Runeforge by 21%. That's 3 ranks, so it'll be 7% per level. We have Portal to the Underworld, which is your army of the dead ghouls explode when they die, dealing 32,000 shadow damage to nearby enemies. So whenever I cast Army of the Dead, when the ghouls attack, they will all explode, dealing even more AoE damage. I'm telling you, you're loaded with AoE damage as an Unholy Death Knight. Runic Tattoos increases your maximum runic power by 15 and runic power generation by 10%. 3 ranks that'll probably actually both apply to maximum runic power and runic power generation. So it'll be 5, 10, and 15, and then it will be 3, 7, and 10, or 3, 6, and 10. It could only be one or the other, but I'm going to take a guess that it's that's both of them together. We have Rotten Touch. Increases the damage dealt by Festering Strike by 15%, 3 ranks, so that'll be 5% per rank. The first talent that you will get, because it's right next to Apocalypse, is going to be Feast of Souls. Increases shadow damage you deal by 8%. That's really boring when they give a talent like that. Like, yes, I'll be okay with something like increases damage dealt by a certain ability, but just flat damage you deal, because most of the damage you deal is going to be shadow, really kind of stinks. Yes, Festering Strike is physical, but Scourge Strike's going to be shadow. I wish they would do something other than just flat shadow damage. We have Eternal Agony, increases the duration of your Dark Transformation by 6 seconds. So I mentioned this earlier. That'll be 2 seconds per rank, 3 ranks. We have a Plague Bearer, increases the damage dealt by your Virulent Plague by 15%, so that's 5% per rank. In case you have forgotten, Virulent Plague is tied to Outbreak, whereas the other plague, Festering Wound, I'm going to call it a plague, is done by your Festering Strike. Down here we have Scourge of the Unbeliever. Scourge Strike has a 10% chance to generate 1 rune. So that basically is a 10% chance to gift you back your rune. 3 ranks, so that'll be 3, 7, and 10, 3, 6, and 10. We have Unholy Endurance, reduces the damage you take from area of effect attacks by 15%. 3 ranks, that'll be 5% per rank. We have Deadliest Coil, increases the damage dealt by Death Coil by 15%. Once again, 3 ranks, 5% per rank. Gravitational Pull, Death Grip now reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. So this is pretty good, especially considering snare options are not as potent on an Unholy DK as they are on a Frost DK. This kind of helps with that, so that's pretty nice. And then lastly, for the non-epic talents, we have Deadly Durability, increases the effectiveness of Anti-Magic Shell and Icebound Fortitude by 10%. So this will be 3 ranks. Once again, it'll be like 3, 7, and 10, or 3, 6, and 10. So Anti-Magic Shell will be healing, will be absorbing more than normal. And then Frostbound Fortitude. Whoops, I'm hovering over the wrong icon. I don't even have it on my bars. Let me pop it up real quick. Icebound Fortitude. I don't know why I was thinking Frostbound Fortitude. I did have it there. It was right next to Path of Frost. I'm glazing over stuff here. As you can see, it's at 22% for 8 seconds instead of 20%. That is the wonderful little 10% increase there. Lastly, we have the 2 epics. First is Double Doom. Sudden Doom can now accumulate 2 charges and will occur 15% more frequently. So Sudden Doom is from your Death Coil. It's the ability that gives you the extra Death Coil, if I am correct on that. It is not in... Oh, wait, here it is, sorry. Your auto attacks have a chance to make your Death Coil cost no runic power. So that is where that comes from. Sudden Doom can accumulate 2 charges and will occur 15% more frequently. So it's not showing here. It does not give you a chance on here. Just know that it happens 15% more, more frequently. Sometimes I've noticed before this I was actually doing a Mistweaver write-up, and there are times in which the tooltips in World of Warcraft Legion are not very clear, and sometimes they don't. They're not as clear as they should be, and sometimes you're gonna have to go through some extra research to figure out what abilities actually do. The last epic portrait here is the Shambler. Your attacks have a chance to summon a super zombie that shambles forward and explodes, dealing 32,000 shadow damage to nearby enemies. So you've actually seen this several times. I don't know if I'll get it off again, but we will try. There it is right there. He just exploded right in front of me. So, you got to see it right off the bat. I missed it, but you guys definitely should have seen it on the video. I only caught him at the very last second there. But that is basically the little zombie. He looks like your dark transformation, and he just kind of like travels forward and then bam, explodes and deals lots of damage. So, that's everything for Unholy Death Knights in terms of their actual abilities and their artifact weapon. Like I said, this is the most surprising change in World of Warcraft Legion. I just was not expecting them to go this, they kept the theme of an Unholy Death Knight, but made it way better. And so it's a surprising change, and I will tell you that people, I think for the first time since the launch of Death Knight, possibly, if I remember correctly, the launch of Death Knight, I think for the first time ever, Frost will be the third leg. Back when Frost was like the default tank spec, I think Frost will end up being the third leg in terms of what people choose as their spec for Death Knight. I remember way back then, I remember loving Frost, but being the only one that liked Frost. Everyone was choosing Unholy or Blood. And then when things changed and Blood became the permanent tank spec, it seemed to, Frost became super popular, and it never looked back from there. But so far from what I've seen on the realm, of course damage numbers are still to be tuned. Unholy Death Knight is becoming the new king, and Blood Death Knight is actually not far behind. So we could see a shift in the power balance of Death Knights in World of Warcraft Legion. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the next video, we'll be looking at PvP and PvE talents. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later. Cheer this out.